We're here today, my brother Jay and my husband John, and we're gonna talk about John's work in, academic work and in history. And would you tell us a little bit about your dissertation and why you wrote it, why you chose the subject, how you did it?
Yes, all right. Now, I have to start out with the original incident, which took place in 1967, 40 years ago, during the Six-Day War of Israel against the surrounding Arab countries. The Liberty was a U.S. naval communications ship. Really, it was a former freighter from World War II, and it had quite elaborate and extensive signal devices on it. Send signal clear to the moon and have it bounced off. Now the Liberty was attacked by Israeli ships and planes during this day, June 8th, 1967, when all the action took place. And the result was, out of the crew there were 34 crewmen killed and 114 wounded. So it was a big incident. And I came across it when I was looking for a topic to dissertation on, and one of the teachers at NYU, one of the man named Bailey, who was in charge of the Middle East studies, had me read a book about this. Now there were a couple of hundred surviving crewmen. Nearly all of them wanted to talk about this, and as I got into it, I would send out a letter asking for information. I'd get back 20 letters. It was an unusual event, this attack and the following thing, in that the United States didn't want to follow up on what happened, but wanted to bury the whole thing. And in fact, they ordered the crewmen to be silent and to not talk about this, even to their wives and immediate friends. However, after a while, the men were discharged from the Navy, and they organized themselves together in a group called the Liberty Sailors, the Liberty Veterans. And as I got to know them, I became very moved by their insistence that they talked about the attack as being something quite deliberate. They said that the ship was sailing at 5 knots an hour, which was like 5 miles an hour, and it was attacked over a period of about an hour and a half. It wasn't just a straight thing that stopped and went away. So I got a lot of information from them, and it turned out that one sailor of the group, Commander James Ennis, had already written a book on this subject already, and so I bought that book and read it. And I found mentions of the Liberty and of the attack in various other books. The main thing that was going on was this wasn't the case of the United States versus Israel, but rather of the Israeli government and the U.S. government combining together against the crew who wanted to talk about this and were forbidden to. Well, I gathered material together, and I found more and more material all the time. Some seamen were very impressive to me. As I got to know them, some of them would talk to American Legion groups and old age groups and high school students and college students and veterans associations. And everyone they could find to talk to, they talked to. and they were the only, they insisted that they were the only American naval ship which had been attacked in peacetime and hadn't had a congressional investigation of the matter. For instance, they mentioned the Pan A, which some older people may remember. This was 1937, the Japanese attacked an American ship in China, and following this there was a lengthy investigation. There have been half a dozen other investigations. One of them, in fact, was just a few years ago when a Syrian rocket attacked an American ship. And in this case, the reactions of the United States were just the opposite. They were on Liberty. There was an extensive investigation by members of the congressional staff and by members of the Navy Department and by also there was investigation in Syria itself where some of the congressional staff went there and had a hearing and called up the pilots of the sailors who had been involved in the attack and for their own. So the attitude toward the attack and it was just the opposite in all other cases, and it was the Liberty. So somebody in the government obviously wanted to bury the whole thing and turn the investigation off.
John, and so you selected this topic for your dissertation.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about the response of the academic world to this dissertation and your peer or your people you were working with, your advisors and things?
Well, at NYU, I had this happy illusion that that scholarship was everything, that the facts and the records would be something that people would want to follow. Instead, there was a great deal of hostility and refusal to even discuss the matter. And now I had an advisor who she at first was very enthusiastic about the whole story. Later, she begged me with tears in her eyes to drop the whole subject. But I wouldn't do it because it would have set me back a year, and I couldn't spend the rest of my life doing this thing. So it was printed as a dissertation, and I found people in other departments aside from the New York NYU History Department who were interested. I found especially a man named Bailey Winder, who was an expert in Saudi Arabia. And I managed to get through and to get the dissertation done. But the story of how this topic was disliked and avoided and shunted aside is a whole other story on top of the original attack. And anyone who goes into the subject has to be ready to deal with a vast amount of material, a great number of unanswered questions, and a lot of mystery. Okay.
Perfect.